Sincere thanks to the Cornell Library for allowing us a platform in these difficult times. We appreciate it so much. This afternoon, you are in for a treat, but first I want to put in a plug for the San Diego Shakespeare Society. We are a membership organization, and our motto is "We do Shakespeare all year round." And that continues even in this plague year. In addition to occasional lectures such as today, we do monthly open readings, now via Zoom, of course. We have a continuing collaboration with the San Diego Museum of Art, and we produce an online Shakespeare showcase featuring local actors that is posted on our Facebook page and other places. And actually, we can't wait to come out of hibernation and resume many of our other traditional activities. So we'd love to have you as a member, and please check out our website for more details. Now on with the show. Professor Paul Mikett is a distinguished scholar, and I know from personal experience, he invests himself passionately in any activity he embarks on. He gave our first lecture of the year in January, speaking on the portrayal of Shakespeare's plays in silent film, which was a very enlightening talk. And today's subject regards the sonnets, which I'm so happy about because one of the traditional activities that the Society had to cancel this year was our annual Sonnets program. So it's nice as some recompense, we have Paul's talk today. So take it away, Paul.
Okay, well, we are on Zoom, so this is going to be one handicap. Zoom isn't an ideal medium. It'd be much better in person, actually, at the beautiful library in Coronado. But we don't have that option, and I think things will go wrong. There are going to be glitches of all sorts. That seems to be the norm. Zoom makes it especially difficult because I'm going to share a screen with you that you can follow along. But that means you won't really be able to see me except at the little box on the side, and maybe I can see you. And not having audience reaction, although I'm not an actor, I have had students and having facial recognition back and forth. Real facial recognition really helps. So we'll just start and see where we go from there. And feel free to ask me questions as we go along. And you should be able to see the screen now. I'm not sure. Maybe someone can tell me if you can see it.
We can see it. Yeah.
Okay, then let's get started. This is a passion of mine for a long time has been to use the sonnets as a kind of drama. And that's not an unusual request, by the way, because the sonnet tradition is very broad and it's very popular. Sonnets were the second most popular kind of activity for literary people at the time of Queen Elizabeth and King James, the Elizabethan and Jacobean. Uh, people who were literate liked to read sonnets. It was a favorite form. It wasn't the favorite publishing form. The bestsellers were called emblem books. I don't know if you've seen them. They're really picture books, the ancestors of comic books today, and they were extremely popular. And some of them very beautiful with woodcuts and so on. But sonnets among literary people were pretty possible and pretty popular. And it's part of a tradition. That verse poetry is written as dramatic dialogue. For any of you who have had English literature, you probably know uh, Robert Browning's My Last Duchess. That's my last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as though she were alive today. And they're dramatic monologues. So my idea was, can we make a dialogue or a scene out of someone will have to turn their mic off. I think we're getting some feedback. Uh, so I'm doing two things. I'm going to have a short scene that I'm going to show you. It will be difficult to show, and I was going to ask two of you to actually perform it for me. Uh, uh, but you'll have to be reading it on the screen because we couldn't get it out to you fast enough. So the tradition, this little play that I've made is from the sonnets of Shakespeare, taking a quatrain or a few lines from this sonnet and a few lines from another sonnet, putting together into a kind of dialogue. features a May and December uh, relationship. That is a young woman and an old man. This tradition comes, it's been in English and literature for a long time. You know, the master of English poetry is not Shakespeare, it's Geoffrey Chaucer. Uh, and the Shakespearean, at the time that Shakespeare lived, the best poets thought of themselves as Chaucerians, followers of Chaucer. Or if you've read in the Romantics in the 19th century, they considered themselves also Chaucerians. And Chaucer was from the Middle Ages. And if you like comedy, I recommend very highly that you read in the Canterbury Tales, The Miller's Tale, and you can find contemporary translations. So the English is pretty easy. And it's hilariously funny, but I warn you, it's a little bit on the what we would call the red side, or it's a little bit risque. Well, not a little bit, it's very risque. It's a tradition of kind of dirty jokes that are called fabliaux, and they're dirty little stories. So Chaucer treats the May and December in a very comic, beautiful way. But the sonnet itself, of course, comes from Petrarch, the master of it, and his famous sonnets, Always to a Beautiful Woman, one particular beautiful woman. We'll go into that in a moment. This was introduced into England by Wyatt. Wyatt was an English poet who had visited Italy and brought back the tradition from Petrarch of the sonnet, or the little song. Sonnets are really little songs. They're very lyrical. You can actually sing them. But the greatest of the sonneteers certainly was not Wyatt, and not Shakespeare, but the Amoretti by Edmund Spenser. And of course, this wasn't just a sonnet. They wrote sonnet sequences. You didn't write one sonnet, you wrote a sequence. Sometimes a lesser poet would write one or two sonnets, but it wasn't a sequence of sonnets. But the undisputed master poet of Shakespeare's time was Edmund Spenser. Everyone looked to Spenser. His famous, long, allegorical, symbolic story is called The Fairy Queen. The Fairy Queen is Queen Elizabeth, of course. She's like a goddess. It didn't do him much good. He kissed Fanny a lot with her, but he didn't get a good job. He tried. That's Edmund Spenser, and it's called the Amoretti. But there are many sonnet sequences by many poets, too many to list here. One, for example, Philip Sidney. You may remember him from your English history of English literature in 12th grade in high school. Astrophel and Stella. Stella, of course, is a star, this perfect woman. Also, you have my favorite, the most musical of all them. The one who sings the best is Michael Drayton. And the woman in his sequence is named Idea. Then you also have the king himself. James the First wrote sonnets. A lot of people wrote sonnets. It was something like haiku in Japan today, where a civilized person is meant to write a haiku. And so it's a popular form. It may seem a little difficult to you today because it has so many restrictions on number of lines, the meter or the rhythm that it has, the kind of rhyme scheme, and so on. It's a real challenge that I've always given my students. You know, the best way to learn a sonnet is from the inside, not reading them by someone else, but trying to write one yourself. And people wonder, how is that so possible that they could write so many and not miss a beat? Or in Shakespeare's plays, how could he write so much? And he wasn't alone. They all did it at the time, the playwrights, many of them. And how could they write in blank verse where the meter is perfect? The musical beat is just perfect, pretty much perfect. There's a mistake here and there for so long. Well, what it means is it wasn't so difficult. It seems difficult to us because we're not in that tradition. But if you have tried to write blank verse, rhythmic verse, you know, ta-da, 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 after a while, it gets in your brain. English, of course, the English language and the accent pattern of English language, which, the stress is always on the first syllable, gives itself to iambic pentameter. That's the name of the meter that was used, the kind of music, the rhythm. It would be something like 4/4 in music today, not 3/4, but 4/4. So James too, and of course, even up to today, E. Cummings, if you know him on the page, his poems look very strange because he uses typographical tricks. So he breaks up the lines and breaks up the words. But in fact, if you look at it, his content, his form is very radical to look at, but his content is very traditional love sonnets. So now let's take a look at some of the things that are in the background of what we're talking about today. Sonnets and sonnet sequence. Yes, you can write a sonnet, but what we're talking about are sonnet sequences. That is a series of sonnets that are connected. And these come from the idea of prayer beads or rosaries. And for the Catholics of the time, a rosary. It's a ring of beads in which you say certain prayers in a certain order. It is taken from the Muslims who have prayer beads. And prayer beads you'll sometimes see in Muslims having them in their hands and quickly going through a number of the names of God back and forth and back and forth. And we remember that in southern Italy, the Muslim had taken over Sicily and parts of southern Italy, and of course conquered Spain pretty much. So the ideas from the Arabs, which were much more sophisticated than the Europeans at the time, had a huge influence. And the sonnet sequence is actually a sequence of little songs going in a circle. If you really want to do one, the last line of the first sonnet is the first line of the second sonnet. And the last line of the second sonnet is the first line of the third sonnet, and so on until you get to the last sonnet. And the last line of the last sonnet is the first line of the first sonnet. In other words, these sequences are not just a linear sequence, they're circular. It's a long circle. And you can say it over and over again. I know my grandmother, who is very Catholic, said the rosary a lot because I think my grandfather had maybe gone to hell or at that time purgatory. But if you said a lot of prayers for them, you could buy their way out. So my grandmother was very good at the rosary. She could whip through them. Every time you said it, they'd get 1,000 years out of purgatory and to go to heaven. By the way, Catholics no longer accept that there is a place called purgatory or cleansing house, a place where you take a bath of your sins. But the sonnet sequence is what we're talking about. I'm drawing in my story, in this short scene that you're about to see, I'm taking it from certain parts of many sonnets to make a dialogue, and they're always on love. Another possible problem is we're talking about a virgin whore. I know this is still prevalent in many countries where the virgin is also taken as a whore. This is a Mexican edition of Playboy magazine, but it shows the woman in a pose something like Our Lady of Guadalupe. And of course, if I don't know if any of you have traveled in Muslim countries, I have, and I can tell you that if you think that sexism or machismo is big here, you haven't seen it yet. And why do men do this? The sonnet sequence is something invented by men to talk about women. And what they do is make an idealized woman, a woman on a pedestal. It's been argued, why do they put her instead of pedestal? Why do they put her up high? Because it's so much fun to drag her down afterwards. So you have the idea of the virgin whore. And that has been a theme throughout literature in many countries. For example, my favorite American dramatist, Tennessee Williams, has one very unusual play. It's a expressionistic play. It's not like his ordinary or very realistic plays. It's expressionistic. It has surreal elements even. and it deals with a virgin whore as a central character. In the Canterbury Tales, Chaucer in the Miller's Tale takes up the May-December marriage. And again, I recommend it very highly because it's so funny. If you know, sometimes literature, like we don't think of it as being as funny as it can be, but it is a hilarious story if you can tolerate off-color stories. This same idea, of course, is in Lolita, the great novel by Vladimir Nabokov, and made into a movie by Stanley Kubrick of 2001 fame. But this movie was a sensation at the time. Here's the older man, that's played by James Mason, and Lolita, played by Sue Lyon. And of course, to show her that she's very young, they have her with a lollipop here. And that was part of the advertising campaign. And so this theme and the use of sonnets to the form of the sequence is the sonnet sequence is thematically about love. It's always about love. In Shakespeare's case, there are many ideas about love. The problem we have with Shakespeare is we don't really know which one he's using at what time, and it makes for a problem of interpretation. Sometimes he means sex, sometimes he means marriage, sometimes he means idealized worship. Sometimes he says love is a very true thing, and sometimes he says it's a lie, it's very false, it's an illusion, it's a trick between people. So, you know, in Antony and Cleopatra, he calls it the infinite variety. So there's an infinite variety of love. There is no one definition, which is perfect if you're trying to make a dialogue out of the sonnets, because there are so many different expressions of what is love in the sonnets. And now, let's see. So what I've done then is take this sonnets and I have made it into a dialogue. I would like maybe a couple of you to try to read it when I finish. I'll be finished pretty soon. I'm trying to keep this to 1 hour. So in reading it, I call it May and December, and there are two characters. There's an old man, and I'm using what is called the dark lady. Dark does not necessarily mean a person whose skin color is dark, although one theory says that the dark lady was a slave, because Shakespeare does talk about the hair, wiry hair, and the skin complexion. On the other hand, some people have said it's not really a lady, it's to a boy, and we know the sonnets were primarily written to a young man. And I put the scene in the garden because Shakespeare likes to do confusions between lovers in gardens. In this, you'll see that there's a character, an old man and a dark lady and an old man. The brown numbers here indicate the sonnet number that I'm taking the part from, in this case, a quatrain. In the red, you see various directions, stage directions on how to perform these lines. For example, whining. The old man is whining because the young woman doesn't treat him right. Or he shows he's passionately sincere. He's like Humbert in Lolita. If you remember him, he's madly in love with the teenage girl, and he's very passionate, but he's also very sincere in his passion, and he becomes a fool. So these are the directions. In here, in also you have who is being talked to, because in this scene there are really three addressees and addressers. There's the dark lady, there's the old man, but there's also the audience. So, in some occasions, the characters, for example, the old man here, talks to the audience. He's not talking here in this quatrain. He is not talking to the dark lady. He's talking to you. Then he moves back and talks to her. So they're giving a comment. Each of the characters gives a comment to the audience about what they think about the other person. And of course, I can go through it very quickly now, but I am going to save it for questions, and maybe we can do a little bit of the reading. So the old man begins, he's whining. He says, "Thou art as tyrannous, so as thou art, as those whose beauties proudly make them cruel. For well thou knowest, my dear doting heart, thou art the fairest and most precious jewel." He's very sincere and he's very passionate. She, of course, is disdainful and sneers at him. "Thou blind fool, love, what dost thou to mine eyes, that they behold and see not what they see?" What are you crazy? Are you nuts? I don't like you. He sees her as this a goddess on a pedestal, and she's saying, you're just not seeing it true at all. We can't do a lot here today, but I would point out that Shakespeare loved puns. So here, when he says, "see where it lies," well, he uses the term for deception for lie, but he also means it for the act of sex. Also, the word die, if you see the word die, like die, but usually spelled dy in the English Renaissance, that is, it means sex. It can mean death, but it also means sex. So there's a punning that's going on, which is another level of meaning. We can't really do very much with that today because that's an even deeper level, and I've tried to avoid it in here. So you see here, the old man towards the end says, "My mistress," this is a very famous sonnet, of course, "my mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral in the ocean is far more red than her lips red. Yeah, and if snow be white, why then her breasts are dun, black, dark. If hairs be wires, black hairs grow on her head. I've seen roses damask, red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks." Here, of course, Shakespeare is uh, taking a tradition of extraordinary, mm, insincere praise of a woman's beauty by a young man and making fun of it. Because he, instead of saying, "Yeah, your lips are so red," though they're not red like beautiful coral in the ocean, "in your hair, well, it's so and so." And then by putting her down so far, he can then lead up to say, "And in some perfumes is there more delight than that in the breath that from my mistress reeks." She has bad breath. "I love to hear her speak, and yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, she treads on the ground. She doesn't float above it. And yet by heaven, I think my love is rare as any she." So he brings her up on the pedestal like other sonneteers of the time put women on a pedestal. He's bringing her down from the pedestal, but he's saying because she's real and she's human, she is the loveliest of all, with all of her faults. And that's not very typical of sonneteers of the time. So Shakespeare in that is unusual. But of course, he could have been writing to a boy. So there's the possibilities of double or triple meaning involved here. So now, with that said, first of all, I'd like if there anyone wants to make a comment or have a question that maybe I can answer, and I will. We'll do that first, and then we'll try to do a little bit of a reading together. So I'm going to open it up to unmute you and see if I went to maybe put in too much information.
Well, I'll make a little remark. Although it's not Shakespeare, the comments about how they talked about women and love of the times remind me of one of his contemporaries, John Webster, who remarks in The White Devil, "There is a sweetness that rots the eater." There is a sweetness that rots the eater. Yeah.
Who's speaking? I don't know. I can't really identify on my screen who is actually speaking.
I think that was Paul.
Paul.
Okay, Smith, yes.
Oh, well, Paul, that is a fantastic play. And White Devil is The Duchess of Malfi. These are two plays that uh, are certainly
Yeah.
equal to anything Shakespeare did, and the blank verse and the poetry is certainly as good. The only way we can put Shakespeare a little bit higher is that he did so many plays at such a high level. But Webster and Ford and Turner and Middleton, there are many others that are have single plays, individual plays, Kidd or Marlowe, that are certainly equal to what Shakespeare wrote. And that play is precisely. But when you're talking about those later,
Yes.
they're sometimes thought of as decadent because they have more horrendous scenes. I'm not saying that Shakespeare can't be over the top.
Turner or Middleton, who, yes.
Yeah. Women. Middleton has a lot of great plays. Webster and Ford, with Ford, "'Tis pity she's a whore." It's the theme is incest, and so
Well, if you
yeah.
if you look at Revenger's Tragedy,
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I think we just lost Paul.
I just came back. I was it- those aren't just scenes of horror. In Revenger's Tragedy, whether it was Turner or Middleton who wrote it, and I guess it's C Act 3, Scene 5, or 5, Scene 3, when Venditti brings out that skeleton that was the woman who loved, and he has a dress on her, and he's going to finally get his revenge.
I'm sorry, Paul.
Image and text and
sorry, Paul.
action.
You're
And
breaking up a
that
lot.
was rarely done, even by Shakespeare. And the other thing that Shakespeare did, however, that many of these guys did not do, was in his language, he made it gestural language, which you could act on the stage with the verbs he uses on his language. Those are sonnets for actors and not just for readers, in my opinion.
You're breaking up a little bit, Paul, but I think I got your point. Yeah. Well, I know Titus Andronicus was a real pot boiler. I think it's a great play, but it's also a pot boiler that goes over the top in terms of violence. And Duchess of Malfi, we actually have werewolves coming into, by that time, as a werewolf in a play. So it does become more exaggerated as you go into the later Jacobean and Carolinian drama. But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, you're not going to get an argument from me that Webster or Turner or many others don't have their moments of truly great plays, which I'm so sorry to say they were rarely performed. But the attitude on love does become distorted. So when you have incest becoming a theme, or in "'Tis Pity She's a Whore" by Ford, where it's a brother and a sister, and in the end he's so obsessed with his sister and the jealousy that he cuts her heart out and enters the stage with the bleeding heart on the end of his dagger. So it's not that Shakespeare couldn't be violent, and he's great at that. He's great at everything he does. I think he does love well, he does irony well, he does comedy well. But he can also be over the top in terms of violence. And of course, that's why the theaters do get closed. That's why in 1648 the theaters get closed, and the Puritans have a good point. If you read the act of closure of the Puritan Parliament, they say because it has, well, translated, sex and violence. There's too much sex and too much violence, and even today we have that movement also. And there's an argument both ways. I don't. For me, literature is not sacred, and I don't give the poet or the playwright to do things that I can't do. I don't think You know, I don't have the idea that the poet is precious. I think the poets or playwrights are like everyone else. They're not special except in what they do. So, can they get away with the extreme portrayals of violence and bizarre or off-center themes? Yeah, to some extent, but you know, I know the general public does draw a line sooner or later, and I think we have that in America today. Censorship is, depending on what part of the country you're in, there is censorship of all sorts. Even Sean, I hate to say, at some public libraries, they still censor.
Mhm.
Mark Twain, for example. But maybe someone else has a comment before we look at the little script I have. No one else?
I've got a kind of a something come to mind.
Yeah, who's speaking?
My name's Michael.
Okay, Michael.
I'm just interested in I'm an actor, and I'm interested in I guess, the structure of the sonnets. And I've studying the pentameter. It seems to me, in my experience, that there's some clues that Shakespeare put into how to act some of, I guess, the drama in pentameter. Do you think that some of that is he acting for, perhaps in the dramatic dialogue in sonnets? Do you think it would be kind of stayed with the way that the sonnets are structured, or is that not necessarily the case?
It could be because, good point, because the sonnets have a rhyme scheme, and in blank verse there aren't rhymes. But what often is not remembered is that Shakespeare uses a lot of couplets in his drama, especially in comedies. So you have a lot of rhymes. Not It's not all blank verse. We think of, oh, Marlowe invents unrhymed metered verse, and Shakespeare follows. Well, yes and no. He's still in a medieval tradition, so there is rhymes. And by the way, the master of this is Chaucer. That's, I don't think there's much dispute about that. But you know what, your question for an actor, it's not very difficult to for the metrics, for the meter, for the rhythm of blank verse, that is iambic pentameter. It's not very difficult because the structure of accents in the English language is that the first syllable receives the strong accent in a two or three syllable word. And of course, if you put one weak syllable before that, you have iambic pentameter. So some people have said, "Oh, well, Chaucer writes it," because when you read Chaucer, it looks like, "Oh my gosh, it was invented before Shakespeare and Marlowe, and it's iambic pentameter." No, it's 10 syllables. He wrote 10 syllable lines. He didn't care about accent because English naturally falls into that. So for an actor, I think you can read it rather naturally. Yeah, I don't think you have to be that concerned about it. Just remember that you don't stop at the end of each line and read on. But I think that the structure of the language, a more difficult problem is that all of these Elizabethan writers are so rhetorical, and we don't have that sense of rhetoric today. Maybe in African American churches, you hear a minister talking, and there's that kind of rhetorical tradition. Martin Luther King had it. But generally speaking, we see that rhetoric is artificial or bombastic or over the top. But it depends on what your taste is. But the rhetorical devices, the manner of expression, if you want to see that's very funny. There's something on PBS called Upstart Crow. The term upstart crow coming from another dramatist who hated Shakespeare and called him an upstart crow. Uh, but it's a very funny series from BBC. It's on Saturdays, about, I don't know, 6 o'clock maybe. And there's a lot of making fun of Elizabethan rhetoric. It's not just Shakespeare. It's It's all of them at the time, where they express it so much. But we know that, for the drama at Shakespeare's time, there wasn't a lot of scenery and there wasn't a lot of costuming. A little bit, but not a lot. Not like today. So there's a lot of descriptive dialogue where they'll describe a battle scene in the distance, and the character will say over yonder and describe the battle, but you won't see the battle. That's not because that Shakespeare was. Some people say, "Oh, because he didn't like the violence on the stage." No, it's because they really couldn't do it on the stage. If they could do it, they did it. They would show violence, and the people, the populace that went to these plays, loved the blood and guts. It was very popular, as it is today.
Right. Thank you.
But I think for a young actor, particularly, it's just a matter of reading it aloud again and again. And what's really fun is to find someone that's with you, or another actor or a friend, and just read scenes or the same scene over and over again. And the more you do it, a good scene, a really good scene, and a long one where you can get your teeth into it, is in Othello, and it's the scene where Iago lies to and tricks Othello. It's a long scene in which he honest Iago uses every lie possible and brings Othello to his a rage and an anger of jealousy against his wife, when it's just not true, of course. So, any other kind of comments? Then I want to we'll take a look at the play, and maybe we can do a little bit of it. I'm trying to keep this within an hour. And it's going to be difficult also because I can only show one scene at a time, one page in Zoom. So you can only see this. It would be nice if we could go to all the pages. And there were really like 5 pages. But we can't really see them all at the same time. So I put the old man and the young woman next to the expression, next to their dialogue, and maybe someone wants to try it. If we have a volunteer to do the old man, to be an old man, and just try reading it, and then we can do what Michael said. We can think about how to read the lines, and again, my opinion is you simply read them and remember that you don't have to stop at the end of the line unless you see a question mark or a comma that might indicate a pause. But generally speaking, the lines will run on from here to here, and you don't have to stop at the end of each line. So do I have a volunteer? Come on, someone besides me can be embarrassed.
Sure.
And who is this?
Mike.
Okay, which mic have we got here? There are 2 mics.
Sindler.
Okay, if you can show your face, I think it might help. Okay, and then we have another volunteer. So you can be, well, no, you look more like the old man, but if you want to be the dark lady, you can be. And we,
Oh, I'm definitely old man.
oh, okay, no, I own that. Excuse me. And then we have another volunteer. What about
Somebody said they were an actor.
Camilla? And there's an actor. What about Camellia?
Hey, sure, yeah, I can do it.
Okay, hot damn. Take your time, guys. I will move the screen. If we have little glitches in technology, it's because I am a jerk and Zoom is a jerk too. So there might be a glitch when I move the screen. Take your time and read slowly. Okay, if you're ready, Mike, and it's Camellia?
Camellia, yeah.
Camellia. Wow, nice name. So how do you pronounce your last name?
So dope. It's pretty tricky.
Well, it's difficult like my name too. So, okay, Mike, you ready?
Sure. Thou art as tyrannous, so as thou art as those whose beauties proudly make them cruel. For well thou know'st to my dear doting heart, thou art the fairest and most precious jewel.
Thou blind fool, love, what dost thou to mine eyes, that they behold and see not what they see? Yet, what the best is, take the worst to be, if eyes, corrupt by over-partial looks, be anchored in the bay where all men ride, where of eyes falsehood hast thou forged hooks, whereto the judgment of my heart is tied.
Yet in good faith some say that thee behold. Thy faith hath not the power to make love groan. To say they err, I dare not be so bold, although I swear it to myself alone. And to be sure that it is not false, I swear 1,000 groans, but thinking on thy face, one on another's neck, do witness bear, thy black is fairest in my judgment's place.
Having, and in quest to have extreme, a bliss in proof and proved of very woe, before a joy proposed behind a dream. And in this world well knows, yet none knows well, to shun the heaven that leads men to this hell. Oh, sorry. Why should my heart think that in a several plot, which my heart knows the wide world's commonplace, or mine eyes, seeing this, say this is not to put fair truth upon so foul a face? In things right true my heart and heads have erred, and to this false plague are they now transferred.
When my love swears that she is made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies, that she may think me some untutored youth, unlearned in the world's false subtleties. In nothing art thou black, save in thy deeds, and thence this slander, I think, proceeds.
The expense of spirit and a waste of shame, and lust in action, until action lust is perjured, murderous, bloody, full of blame, savage, extreme, rude, cruel, not to trust, enjoyed no sooner but despised straight, past reason hunted and no sooner had, past reason hated as a swallowed bait, on purpose laid to make thy taker mad, mad in pursuit and in passion so, possession so.
My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why, then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I've seen roses damask red and white, but no such roses I see in her cheeks. And in some perfumes there's more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love is rare as any she belied with false compare.
Your microphone is off.
'Tis better to be vile than vile esteemed, when not to be receives reproach of being, and the just pleasure lost which so deemed not by our feelings, but by others seeing. For why should others' false adulterate eyes give salutation to my sportive blood? Or on my frailties, which are frailer spies, which in their wills count bad what I think good? No, I am that I am, and they that level of my abuses reckon up thy own. I may be straight, though thy themselves belevel, by their rank thoughts my deed must not be shown. Unless this general evil they maintain, all men are bad, and in their badness reign.
When my love swears that she's made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies, that she might think me some untutored youth, unlearned in the world's false subtleties, thus vainly thinking that she thinks me young, although she knows my days are past the best. Simply, I credit her false speaking tongue. On both sides, this is simple truth suppressed. But wherefore says she not, she is unjust? And wherefore shall I say not that I am old? Oh, love's best habit is in seeming trust, and an age in love loves not to have years told. Therefore I lie with her, and she with me, and in our faults by lies we flattered be. In faith I do not love thee with mine eyes, for they in thee 1,000 errors note. But 'tis my heart that loves what they despise, who in despite of view is pleased to dote.
Thou blind fool, love, what dost thou to mine eyes, that they behold and see not what they see?
Hey, great job, guys.
And seen. Yes.
Hey, have you, did either one of you have had acting experience?
Not really.
Camellia, your mic's off, but yeah, good job, both of you. Thanks a lot. You know, I was playing. You did that line really well about lies because he's Shakespeare's punning, and so he's he says when he knows she lies, he's saying he knows she has other boyfriends, but he also is saying he knows that she's deceptive. And he plays with that a lot. What I really, this is taken from the 138, sonnet 138 is my favorite sonnet, not because I believe this. It's not the infinite variety, the one in the infinite variety that I pick, but I do like it. And what he's saying love is the best habit in seeming trust. And so it's a mutual lie. Love is a lie. She knows I'm old, but she pretends I'm not. And I know that she's sleeping around with other people, and I pretend that I don't see that. And so we love each other because in our faults by lies we flattered be. We flatter each other. I don't know, this seems a little bit cynical. This is the most cynical of Shakespeare's sonnets. However, it is a great sonnet when we keep thinking there's the infinite variety. For me, it's every time I've read Shakespeare, I really, he throws curveballs because I think I know what he means by love. And then the next minute he gives another variety, another meaning of it that can make me mad. Well, great job, guys. Any other volunteers want to give it a try? We had two brave people here. What about Paul?
No, I was just going to make a tiny little remark. It
Okay.
was, after all, Shakespeare who gave our language the word heartache.
Excuse me, you break up a little bit of my computer. Paul, would you repeat? I didn't catch, my computer broke up the sound. Well, at any rate, I expect these glitches with the computer to happen. It's normal. Do we have any other volunteers that want to give it a try? What about Michael? You said you were an actor or wanted to be, or you are?
Yeah, sure. I'll give it a shot.
And do we have another volunteer? And remember, a man playing a woman's part in Shakespeare's time is perfectly legitimate. What about you, Gordon?
Very well. Sounds good.
Okay, well, let's try it one more time. I really like that last reading. I don't know why the two of you, Camellia and Michael, I don't know where you got your cynicism, but it came through for me. Okay, well, who will see? The old man will be Gordon.
Okay. Good casting.
Okay.
Thou art as tyrannous, so as thou art, as those whose beauties proudly make them cruel. For well thou know'st to my dear doting heart, thou art the fairest and most precious jewel.
Thou blind fool, love, what dost thou to mine eyes, that they behold and see not what they see? They know what beauty is, see where it lies, yet what the best is, take the worst to be. If eyes corrupt by over partial looks be anchored in the bay where all men ride, why of eyes falsehood hast thou forged hooks whereto the judgment of my heart is tied?
Yet in good faith some say that thee behold, thy face hath not the power to make love groan. To say they err, I dare not be so bold, although I swear it to myself alone. And to be sure that is not false, I swear, 1,000 groans but thinking on thy face, one on another's neck do witness bear, thy black is fairest in my, yeah, oh, sorry. Oh, on what, I went away. Oh, okay. So
Had having, and in quest to have extreme, a bliss in proof and proved a very woe. Before, a joy proposed behind a dream. All this the world well knows, yet none knows well to shun the heaven that leads men to this hell. Why should my heart think that a several plot, which my heart knows the wide world's commonplace, or mine eyes seeing this say this is not, to put fair truth upon so foul a face? In things right true my heart and eyes have erred, and to this false plague are they now transferred.
when my love swears that she is made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies, that she might think me some untutored youth, unlearned in the world's false subtleties. In nothing art thou black save in thy deeds, and thence this slander, as I think, proceeds.
The expense of spirit in a waste of shame is lust in action, until action lust is perjured, murderous, bloody, full of blame, savage, extreme, rude, cruel, not to trust, enjoyed no sooner but despised straight, past reason hunted and no sooner had, past reason hated as a swallowed bait, on purpose laid to make the taker mad, mad in pursuit and in possession so.
My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I've seen roses damasked, red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground, and yet by heaven, I think my love is rare, as any she belied with false compare.
'Tis better to be vile than vile esteemed, when not to be receives reproach of being, and the just pleasure lost, which is so deemed not by our feeling, but by others seeing. For why should others' false adulterate eyes give salutation to my sportive blood? Or on my frailties, why are frailer spies, which in their wills count bad what I think good? No, I am that I am, and they that level at my abuses reckon upon their own. I may be straight, though they themselves be bevel. By their rank thoughts my deeds must now be shown. Unless this general evil they maintain, all men are bad, and their badness reign.
When my love swears that she is made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies, that she might think me some untutored youth, unlearned in the world's false subtleties, thus vainly thinking that she thinks me young, although she knows my days are past the best, simply I credit her false-speaking tongue. On both sides thus is simple truth suppressed, but wherefore she says she is unjust, and wherefore say not I that I am old. Oh, love's best habit is in seeming trust, and age in love loves not to have years told. Therefore I lie with her, and she with me, and on our faults by lies we flattered be. In faith I do not love thee with mine eyes, for they in thee 1,000 errors note. But 'tis my heart that loves what they despise, who in despite of you is pleased to dote.
Thou blind fool, love, what dost thou to mine eyes, that they behold and see not what they see?
Okay, I think that is taken the hour. Went pretty fast for me. I am going to, in the chat box at the bottom, I'm going to type in my email address. And so if any of you want to continue the conversation at another time, that's fine with me. And so I will put it in now. I think that's it. Yeah. So there you go. You have my email. If you want to continue chatting, you know, in the Shakespeare Society, we love to talk about Shakespeare in any different way. Actors, scholars, people who are just being introduced. As Gordon said, to have you involved is really a pleasure. And I don't have all the answers, but I would love to talk to you about what I don't know.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. This has just been wonderful. Just wonderful background, context, a close reading, and wonderful performances from Michael, and Camelia. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much. If I could just on a closing, we have this lecture series. Our next lecture will be on January 10th, 2021. And it will be, the topic is Shakespeare in Mexico. And our speaker will be Dr. Leticia Garcia, from the University UC Irvine. So please check that out, and please check our website for other events. So thank you all for showing up. And thank the Coronado Library again.